in your works you've said that homosexuals deserve to die or be exiled. So what do you say to those people who are wearing polyester with two blended fabrics? Those who plant two different kinds of seeds in the same field, or those who breed the two different kinds of the same animal, do they deserve to die as well?
Number one, it is true that the Bible teaches that sinners are worthy of death. I don't want to indicate in any way that I think that being worthy of death in this way is in any way unique to homosexuals. I believe I deserve to die for my sins. The sentence of death rests on the whole human race for this condition of sinfulness, and also for particular sins, of which homosexuality is one, heterosexual sin is another, and so on. So that's the first part. The second part of your question is in the Old Testament, there are three kinds of laws. There's moral law, there's judicial law, and there's ceremonial law. God required of the Jews in the Old Testament that the book of Ephesians calls it ordinances contained within the commandments. It's a holiness code. So he's teaching them this, not that. So unclean foods, you're not to eat this, you may eat that. And the New Testament tells us very expressly that this holiness code is not erased as though it was a bad idea, but it's fulfilled in Christ, which is why the ceremonial law of the Old Testament is not binding on Christians today, but the moral law is.
I mean, it's amazing the disparity when you get to a college campus. There are smart kids, there are kids who are as dumb as rocks, and at all kinds of universities.
How are the dumb people there?
It's really not difficult to get into colleges.
Is there an issue if there are people that love each other and they choose to express their love in a way that does not harm anyone, nor does it harm themselves, and it's just purely love? Is there a problem with that?
You including sexual expression of love, or are you just talking about loving each other? I think we should all love each other.
Yeah, and I'm including sexual expression of love too. If it doesn't hurt anyone else and it doesn't hurt you and it's purely love, why is there an issue with that?
Okay, first, if that were the case, I would agree with you.
Why is that not the case then? Because
okay.
I feel like that's probably where we're.
Yeah, the place where this is hitching up is in that phrase, provided it's not hurting anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, we believe that God tells us that these things are destructive. And
don't say we, because that includes me. But
okay.
We, and I'm not part of that. We.
Got it. Okay. So when I'm saying we here, I'm not saying we here in this room. I'm saying we Christians. I'm speaking on behalf of Christians.
Some Christians, not all Christians.
It's the public university, no religion.
Where did you go?
Case in point. I went to Yale and Notre Dame. They'll let anybody in.
Quiet, please. Okay, I'd like to hear the gentleman's question.
Sure. So I'm an English student. I study language. I study text. I want to know why, I guess, people in general, because I didn't really listen to much of what you had to say, because I don't really believe that the Bible is the word of God.
Should I listen to your question as carefully?
Well, sir, I'm asking you about the root of your faith.
Should I listen to your question? Should I listen to your? Would you listen to your question? Should I listen to your? Would you like me to listen to your question as carefully as you listen to my talk?
If you want to stir people up, talk about their life, and if you mess with that, people aren't going to like that.
All Americans have the right to make decisions about their own bodies, including the right to contraception without interference from the government, business, or religious institutions. Do you agree with that?
I believe there ought to be no legal restriction at all on what a woman does with her own body. If she decides that she wants to chop off this finger, I don't think there ought to be a law against it. If she wants to chop off all her fingers, I don't think there should be a law against it. But why do we not have to make a law against it? Well, we don't. The reason that's not a pressing social issue is precisely because her fingers are her body. Right? She takes care of that which is her body. The issue in the whole abortion rights thing, and this goes back to my first point in my first talk, and I hope you can see how your religious presuppositions define everything, because if you are approaching this from a Christian vantage point, reproductive rights is code word for my body and my child, and I can take my child's life if I want, and no one can tell me that I can't. So if you believe, as I do, that there's more people involved than just the woman.
I just don't think that unbelievers are fully consistent with where their worldview is going.
The first part of your show, whatever this is, show, whatever. I'm entertained. I don't know why. I was wondering, you mentioned something about us having to live up to our lifestyles that we try to put out for society, try to live up to that. And I'm wondering, why aren't you? I mean, I'm listening to this, all I hear is a bunch of just hypocrite talking, because I look through and I look at people like, I have 2 aunts that are gay, and they've been together for years, like way before I was born. And, they're 2 of the most sweetest people I've ever known. Look at the shirts off your back. They'll do anything for anyone. And, and I find it weird that, for this religion who has such an loving and caring and passionate God for all the beings that he's created, why would he shun them if he created them in that way? And, I'm not understanding where you're getting off all this hate talk and, casting judgment on other people, because I was pretty sure the Bible said, judge not lest ye be judged. And my favorite quote was, let ye without sin cast the first stone. And, I'm trying to understand why you're just being such a hypocrite, because you're not talking, nothing you're saying is connecting. And I just really want to answer, and I would like it in the form of logic, if that's possible.
Okay. With Matthew, you quoted Matthew 7:1, judge not lest you be judged, for the judgment with which you judge, you shall be judged. Jesus is not saying don't ever judge. He says the judgment that you use is going to be used on you. He says don't judge with a double standard. In other words, I've not said anything here. I've not said anything here tonight that I'm not fully willing to have applied to me. The Bible applies to me in the first instance. The Bible applies to me before I think about anybody else, before I think about laws or policy, or it applies to me. I am a sinner.
This inconsistency is a common grace almost. It allows the unbeliever to survive, to get on with life, and to not self-destruct.
I study psychology here,
okay,
and I'm particularly interested in Kinsey's research, and I came here under the supposition that it was about Kinsey. I guess I missed that part in your lecture where you talked about Kinsey, and I was interested in where your research is that shows that his is wrong, because you say that Kinsey is wrong. Yeah. I'm just interested in what kind of surveys you conducted to prove that wrong. What your counter-argument are. Yeah. What your counter-arguments are.
The particular things I would object to with Kinsey is his correspondence with a guy named von Weizsäcker, a German Nazi who did experiments.
Right, so you have a problem with who he was friends with, not with his research.
Well, no, he was using von Weizsäcker's information as part of his research.
Okay, so you still have a problem with his friends, not his research.
No, his friends were his research. His friends, he collected information from these people, and in Kinsey's book, I think it's Table 32, he talks about orgasmic experience in infants 2 months old, 4 months old, and he has the table that goes up and explains how many orgasms in a 24-hour period these little kids were having. And the only way they'd be having what Kinsey called orgasms, because he defined orgasms in these situations as including convulsions, throwing up, screaming, fear, which is what a child would do when being preyed upon by a sexual predator. That's defined as an orgasm in his operational definition. And he includes that in his research. He included prisoners and represented them as part of the general population. He included prisoners, including people who were in jail for sex crimes, as normed, ordinary citizens. And so I believe it was a junk science to go with a junk morality. So, right, there you go. Yes.
You've almost gone beyond where you can talk to someone. I mean, and I see it on both sides. Christians and non-Christians, they just can't reason well. And it's scary, run by emotions. And we all are. None of us are perfectly consistent. We're all only human. But it's such a disaster out there that it's getting to the point where, I mean, and I know people have said this in probably every generation, the barbarians aren't at the gates. We're hanging out with them now. We're a culture who is just the littlest thing hurts us, but we don't mind killing others.
So why do folks in Bloomington want to pretend that Wilson is a racist? And the answer being because they would like to distract from the fact Kinsey was a dirty white perv peddling junk science in defense of destructive sexuality. The reason we feel like you're racist is because in Southern Slavery as It Was, the monograph by Steve Wilkins and Douglas Wilson, I think that's you, it says, slavery produced in the South a genuine affection between the races that we believe we can say has never existed in any nation before the war or since. Whatever its failures, slavery produced in the South a degree of mutual affection between the races which will never be achieved through any federally mandated efforts. Can you please elaborate on that? How is that not racist?
Sure.
It's actually, and one more thing, three historians even said, condemned it, with one of them saying that it was as spurious as Holocaust denial.
Okay.
That's pretty racist to me. So
Okay.
can you please elaborate and how it interconnects with Christ and how Christ had unconditional love for the world and how the two interconnect, how racism's okay because God said it was okay, which is what this pamphlet is telling me.
Okay, well let me step into your worldview for a minute, and let me speak to this thing that I said in Southern slavery, and this is very important. Assuming what your view of the world to be correct, what you just read, if I agreed with you, I would dismiss as stupid and asinine, but not as racist. Especially since elsewhere in the booklet, I define racism, racial animosity, racism, and the belief of superiority of one race over another as a sin against God. In that booklet, I do that.
So you counter your own points?
No, I'm saying that some people who agitated things needed to do a little bit more reading before they got the wind in their sails.
I've done a lot of reading.
So here's this is the fundamental thing. So just so you understand this, as far as the spurious racism charge, I believe that racism is a sin. I believe that it's evil. I believe that God hates it, and I believe that God will judge it along with all other sins at the last day. Now, is that racist?
No.
No. All right. But that's my position.
Okay.
Now, if I believe that you shouldn't take a sinful institution, which I believe slavery was, and attack it by fomenting a war, if I believe that you ought not to tackle the problem that way, but rather you ought to attack the problem another way, you might differ. And you're invited to differ with whether my approach to it is wise or stupid, foolish, whatever, but it's not racist.
Privilege and distinct honor to introduce the 44th President of the United States of America, Barack H. Obama. We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth. It is now our generation's task to carry on what those pioneers began. For our journey is not complete until our wives, our mothers, and daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. citizen is forced to wait for hours to exercise the right to vote. Our journey is not complete until we find a better way to welcome the striving, hopeful immigrants who still see America as a land of opportunity, until bright young students and engineers are enlisted in our workforce rather than expelled from our country. Our journey is not complete until all our children, from the streets of Detroit to the hills of Appalachia to the quiet lanes of Newtown, know that they are cared for and cherished and always safe from harm. That is our generation's task. To make these words, these rights, these values of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness real for every American. Being true to our founding documents does not require us to agree on every contour of life.
We live in a time when racism is the all-purpose attack your enemy. So I want to say, if someone says, are you a racist? First, now, well, what do you mean by racist?
Okay, I'll jump in.
Okay.
Okay. Do you believe the Civil War was good?
No. No.
Are you a big fan of Abraham Lincoln?
No. I think he was a great man, but I don't think he was a helpful president. I think his presidency had a number of destructive consequences that we're still dealing with today.
African-American woman.
Identify as black. Caitlyn looked absolutely amazing.
Dealing with the fact that we don't have slavery anymore?
No, dealing with the fact that the federal government thinks they have the right to define what marriage is for all 50 states.
How do we get to marriage and talking about slavery?
Well, at the founding, you had 13 colonies form the federal government. As a result of our expansion westward and as a result of the constitutional shifts in the war between the states, we then had the idea take root that the federal government could create states. Now, the federal government is older than the new states being created.
So the role of the court wasn't settled. John Marshall settled it. He made it clear that the decisions of the Supreme Court were binding on the state courts. Remember, the state courts, as I said, they were here before the Constitution. It wasn't clear whether they were going to have the final say or these new federal courts, including the Supreme Court. He established the Supreme Court as the final arbiter of what the Constitution means. The branch that was going to make a decision that was going to be binding not only on the citizens, but also on the states, and also importantly on the federal government itself.
People think that the centralized government has authority to tell the lower downs what to do. So we think of it as a giant corporation, and the federal government is the CEO, and all the states are the department managers. That's not the constitutional system. That's not what the Constitution created. That's not what the Constitution was set up to do.
As you already know, the Supreme Court is at the top of the ladder.
There has been a decision handed down in at least one of the two cases regarding gay marriage in America that we expected today from the U.S. Supreme Court.
A cake shop owner in Colorado now facing fines or even jail time after he refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding.
The Supreme Court justice had said, okay, everybody, you've got to let two dudes marry. You've got to let two women marry, all you people in your states. The federal government would have been handled at that time by everybody just laughing at them. It would have been beyond ludicrous because the federal government did not have that power, did not have that authority. But it does now, or it certainly thinks it does now, and even many opponents of same-sex marriage are positioning themselves, political opponents. They're saying, well, if the Supreme Court decides that we've got to do it this way, then, well, they're the Supreme Court after all. We've got to do whatever they say. That notion that we've got to do whatever they say is a political approach that has a lineage, and that lineage goes right back to the war between the states and the way the 14th Amendment was adopted and then applied.
The clerk's office turned away gay couples who sought marriage licenses Thursday, defying a federal judge's order that said deeply held Christian beliefs don't excuse officials from following the law. County Clerk Kim Davis cited her religious beliefs and decided not to issue marriage licenses to any couple, gay or straight.
On what?
I would ask you all to
Why are you not
go
issuing
ahead
marriage licenses today?
because
Under whose authority are you not issuing
under God's authority.
Look, this began when a handful of unelected judges decreed they knew better than the American people, and they were going to write into the Constitution a right that doesn't exist.
The Bill of Rights was a series of appendices, a series of amendments.
If resistance to the federal court order ceases at once, the further presence of federal troops will be unnecessary. The city of Little Rock will return to its normal habits of peace and order, and a blot upon the fair name and high honor of our nation in the world will be removed.
Kim Davis is now in federal custody. Just moments ago, a judge found her in contempt of court because she would not issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Thus will be restored the image of America and of all its parts as one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The original Constitution that the Federalists agreed to in order to get the Anti-Federalists who opposed the adoption of the Constitution to allay their concerns. The original Bill of Rights were all restrictions on the power of the central government.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor.
Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power?
It's basic rights. Women can't be free. Abortion on demand and without apology.
It's really hard to say that that's a meaningless compass else. Much more difficult than it used to be. So I think we're making very significant progress. You can see that heart start beating at 7 weeks. A heart doesn't beat in a meaningless mass of cells.
Well, hold on, but respectfully, no one in their 20s cares at all or understands about anything you just said.
Yeah, that's their problem.
But it doesn't matter anymore. What you just said.
Yeah.
Everything you just said doesn't matter. No one knows. The Bill of Rights is number 14. No one cares about that, Doug.
Yeah, they're too busy checking their email.
So explain to me, finish the sentence, the Civil War was bad because...
Well, if they don't care about what I just said, they don't care about the Civil War. If they don't care what I just said...
But they care about slavery, and slavery was a bad thing, and it ended because of the Civil War.
No, what you're saying is that these people who cannot be bothered to be informed on what actually happened in 1861 to 1865, they're too bored. You're making my head hurt. Am I going to have to read a book or something?
Was slavery bad?
What? Yeah.
Okay. So we got rid of it through a war.
Yeah, we killed 600,000 people to get rid of it. Everywhere else in the Western world, no other country that practiced slavery got rid of it the way we did through a war. So was it bad to kill 600,000 people? Yeah, that's bad too. Now what? Why didn't we do it peacefully the way other countries did? Why did we go to war over it? All right. So those issues are political issues that don't have anything to do with the rightness or wrongness of slavery.
We have the ability to change this, and to change this.
And just get out and vote.
Without a war fought in the streets.
So
we have the ability to change
the Civil
this.
War wasn't a just war then.
the Civil War was absolutely a just war.
So how much more with abortion?
We have the ability to change this directly, simply by standing up and engaging.
So you're not willing to go to war for the unborn?
Where they say, if you don't want to do it our way, which is killing 600,000 people, right? Take all the money that was spent on that war and just buy all the slaves, for pity's sake, right? And set them free. You know, why the bloodshed? Why do you have to have blood? Well, if I object to the blood, if I object to settling that kind of dispute the way no other nation did, then why all of a sudden am I accused of defending the institution of slavery, which I want to get rid of peacefully?
We should start with Christians and with everyone who values life standing up and speaking out together.
This is the difference between the conservative mindset and the liberal mindset. The conservative thinks always in terms of trade-offs. The liberal thinks in terms of solutions. The liberal wants solutions, and he doesn't want to think in terms of trade-offs. He doesn't want to think that there's ever a price tag for what he's advocating. He wants free chocolate milk for everybody.
Call the police! Call the police! Is this what you want to remember? That you stood up for their children and look at you and realize that you're a bigot and you discriminate against people?
And why can't we have it? Why can't we just vote for it, right? Well, because the world's not that way.
Federal Department of Health and Human Services overturned Medicare's blanket ban on sex reassignment surgery.
Trans medicine is a medically necessary intervention.
Just last week, Massachusetts became the third state in the country to cover transgender health care under Medicaid.
The Civil War was a series of trade-offs, and I would argue that it was a bad set of trade-offs.
Gay is the new black.
The definition of civil rights, the word civil rights, is about equal rights for all, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, race, religion. And Barack Obama himself has defined this as a civil rights issue. So if he can say it's civil rights, then I can say it's civil rights.
Seneca Falls to Selma to Stonewall, that's how we achieved gay rights. That's how we made this union more perfect.
We traded things we ought not to have traded, and we're still paying for it. That's my argument. That's not to say that I think that the elimination of slavery was a bad thing. You know, because slavery's gone, and good riddance.
This transition has been harder on me than anything I could imagine.
I'm as pro-life as you can possibly be.
It's all just a matter of line items.
Believe that abortion ought to be against the law.
You know, you can imagine where they would run with this. Like, they're selling bumper, you know.
Would keep your lab happy.
Another 50 livers a week. Another boy.
I believe that the lives of the unborn should be protected.
It's almost like they don't want to know where it comes from. We need limbs, but no hands and feet need to be attached. And you're like, I don't see the legs. Did you see any legs? Make it so that we don't know what it is, but we know what it is. I mean,
do I want to kill 1 million people in order to achieve a pro-life objective? Right. If I had a button in front of me and I push that button, and if I push that button, we're going to have the Great North American War. 1 million people are going to die. After which there will be no abortion on demand. Okay. That's the kind of trade-off that I'm talking about. Nobody was running the calculus before the war between the states, saying, well, we're going to kill 600,000 people. That's not how wars develop. That's not how they go. You get in, and then when you're in, you're stuck. verb to tolerate is a verb that requires a direct object. Everything boils down not to whether you tolerate, but what you tolerate. And conversely, it also boils down to what you will not tolerate. Every society tolerates, and every society refuses to tolerate. Every subculture tolerates some things and refuses to tolerate others. Every society, for example, keeps some things and throws other things away. So we're here at the dump. This is the stuff that this society, this town, is throwing away. And there's a bunch of stuff in town that they're not throwing away. Everybody keeps stuff and everybody throws stuff away. The only question before us is, what do you keep and what do you throw away? What do you hang on to and what do you jettison? Our culture currently is adopting, purchasing, bringing home, taking into their living rooms a novel approach to marriage, family, culture, society. They've got this new thing that they've set up in their homes, and because they are doing that, they are engaged in throwing away their Christian heritage, their Christian legacy. If you keep one thing, you have to throw another thing away and flip it around. You can't keep everything. A society that kept everything is a society that would be a dump. It would just be a random pile of things. You've got to sort, you've got to select, you've got to throw some things away and keep other things. Now, one of the things that people don't realize, and I'm sure this happens at the dump all the time, they throw things away and then later they realize that something that was precious to them is missing. Maybe it got dumped into the bag, and maybe I lost my wedding ring, or that sort of thing. And so they say, oh no, I threw something away that I didn't mean to throw away. Now, in our time, in this era, we are self-consciously rejecting our explicit Christian heritage. What we're throwing away that we don't know that we're throwing away is our liberty. We're throwing away our liberty. We're throwing away our ability to speak freely. We're throwing away our right to free speech. We didn't know that was in the garbage bag. We didn't know that we shook that off when we brushed off all our Christian commitments. We didn't know that certain things were going to go with it. So, and this is of interest to non-Christians as well. Free speech, the liberty of conscience, having a right to certain fundamental religious convictions, that right is a right that Christians developed. That came out of Christian societies. It's not something that just happened all by itself. If you look at the history of the world, where did the right to free speech develop? Where has it been established, protected, and guarded for as long as it has been? Well, overwhelmingly in Christian societies. And that's why it's no accident when we are seeing this explicit rejection of the Christian faith. We are seeing almost simultaneously the jailing of county clerks whose conscience forbids them to issue a license. We've seen bakers fined $135,000 in the public sector, county clerk in the private sector, florists, photographers, videographers, bakers, saying you must conform. So what they're doing, what's happening is we've adopted this new commitment to egalitarianism and same-sex mirage, and then as an absolute necessity, we are throwing away liberty of conscience, the right to free speech, and all these things that liberals claim are precious to them. Well, I'm sorry, you can't take your chainsaw to the orchard and then go out in the fall and ask, where are my apples? The whole idea of liberty of conscience is a distinctively Christian development. When the First Amendment was established and put into the U.S. Constitution, that was America at that time was not a secularist society. It was overwhelmingly Christian, Protestant, and for the most part Calvinistic. So basically, I would say what you can expect if Christians prevail in the future, you can expect largely what you got the first time. Liberty. Christians love liberty. And the foundation of that liberty was proclaimed, I think, at the very first, when the Lord Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene after the resurrection. That's the foundation of liberty. Christ rose from the dead. If Christ rose from the dead, everything is transformed. If Christ didn't come back from the dead, then we're just a bunch of atoms colliding into each other, and the strongest, the strongest at the top can squash people as it suits them, as it fits with their notions of public order. If I'm not created in the image of God, certain things follow. If my atheist neighbor is not created in the image of God, certain things follow. And over time, men act in accordance with their collective convictions. You've seen those bumper stickers. If you can read this, thank a teacher. If you've ever exercised your First Amendment rights, thank a Christian. Thank a Bible-believing Christian. We invented it. The First Amendment is our contribution, right? And so you can't come in late in the day and pretend that we are the enemies of free speech when we are the ones who put it on the map. Agreed to in order to get the anti-federalists who oppose the adoption.
There has been a decision handed down in at least one of the two cases regarding gay marriage in America that we expected today from the U.S. Supreme Court.
A cake shop owner in Colorado now facing fines or even jail time after he refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding.
The Supreme Court justice had said,
the answer being because they would like to distract from the fact Kinsey was a dirty white slavery as it was that we believe we could ever be achieved. It's pretty
Now, is that
privilege and distinct? We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual...
I just had to record it so I can put it on YouTube because it's on... it's not on YouTube. But it's the same thing that I was doing yesterday about the professor trying to talk about free speech, and then all these social justice warriors come and paint bruises on their faces like they've been